to introduce him. He's my neighbor in the theoretical chemistry floor. And he has a certain flair for the controversies.
No.
And he's very proud of it, apparently. So,
I speak truth to power.
So let's see how controversial is this one.
Okay, thank you very much for this kind introduction.
Very kind.
And thank you, Ute, for forcing my hand into this presentation. So in between chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Debussy's sonata, she goes and says, would you mind giving a talk on applied versus basic science? I looked at her and said, no. She says, but you have to. So I said, yes. And that kind of forced me into thinking what I want to talk. And, right. So I also need to apologize. I'm teaching 5 hours of frontal classes on Tuesdays. So I'm leaving after this session and I missed the morning talks. So maybe some of what I'm going to say will be repetitious, but I will try to do my best to let you know what I want to say. Right? So the introduction is first we need to understand what do we mean when we say pure versus applied science. So it's very, to me, a very simple distinction. Pure science is driven by curiosity. I want to understand this because that's what I want. We're like kids in a playground. We want to build towers out of sand or play with that thing because that's just what we want to do. We are lucky enough that someone is paying us to do that. So pure basic fundamental research is curiosity driven, and applied research is driven by a mission. Right? What the mission is, who knows? Right? It can be an infinite number of things, but the mission is driving the research, not the curiosity. Of course, somewhere, these are very, very broad strokes, and everything we do is somewhere along the line connecting those. And my research is kind of all over the place. Most of what I do is very, very close to this part. It's very, very applied. No one will ever do anything with that. I'm fine with that. It's okay, because I want to understand. I want to understand the how excitations flow in photosynthetic systems. Why? Just cause. Because that's what we do. We solve riddles for a living. However, some things might be slightly more useful, right? And we can write them in this way, and this is physical reviews applied. So this is in a journal where you write ideas from physics, which might someday be applied to something. And not embarrassed to say, what you see here, you might not recognize. This is the provisional patent form. So when you apply for a patent, you have a provisional form for patent. This is how it looks like. And I have somewhere here, my name is on it. I don't know where. I deleted there it is. This is my name. And I'm deleting the invention due to legal necessities. And this is a device to do something, right? As applied as it can be. It's an idea to how actually do something, which is kind of nice, turns out. Because it's also a riddle, right? And we're also solving puzzles. It's just, the question is towards a mission. So the question that I came when I started thinking about this proposal is what do I want to tell you? Do I want to tell you about kind of this voyage that I did? And gladly I said no, because I cannot live up to the bar that Anat put. That was really beautiful. So I will take a very different perspective, and I will ask, I will ask the very broad question, okay? Which is somewhat political in a way, or at least in political in terms of it discusses policy. And that is, what should the university do? Okay? But first, and this is quite an amazing coincidence, that Anat was pushed to study to answer the applicability because she was trying to publish in Science. This is what Science wrote in their first editorial. I don't know if you can see here the year, 1883. So the first publication of scientific research in the US, and this is the first editorial, and you can download it, it's online, and they write, blah, blah, blah. Leading feature of American science, however, is that which most distinctly characterizes it, American science, is its utilitarianism, applied science. True, there are in our country able investigators working in scientific fields which do not offer the promise of material reward, but notwithstanding this, it remains still true that those scientists whose principles are capable of useful applications are the most zealously cultivated among us and attract the largest number of students. The United States was the basis of applied research. Nor is this to be at all regretted. We're kind of apologizing here, look. Research is nonetheless genuine, investigation nonetheless worthy, because the truth it discovers is utilizable for the benefits of mankind. Granting, even, that the discovery of truth for its own sake is a nobler pursuit, because a less purely selfish one. So there is I find this really nice that they're putting a moral stamp on what it is that we should do in the university. It's beautiful. And you can trace the requirements of science to put a May sentence, you know. In all of our research, in the STEM fields, we put May sentences, right? This research may lead to novel advances in curing whatever it is, right? These are May sentences. While as you go to industry, they actually want you to tell them how you will do it. Right? It's a different thing altogether. So you can understand why science wants you to put these May sentences, because it's already there in the first editorial. It's a long-standing tradition of Science magazine. Okay, so I want to ask, what should the university do? Why? Well, because we live in a university, right? And I'm not going to ask what people should do. I don't know what people should do. But I want to ask what universities should do. Okay, and there's a corollary to that, which is, what is the role of a university and how should public funding be spent? And it's a corollary because essentially all funding from the university is public. So I'm not asking what should the Ministry of Science do. I'm not asking what should I do. I'm asking what should the university as a body do. That's the question that I want to think of. So the root question is, what are we here for? What is this university? And those people who know me, they know that I've been contemplating about this question for a long time. And I have my own version of the answer, but different people have different answers to what the university is, right? First thing, university is a school for advanced professions, right? We teach people how to be doctors, or how to be accountants and lawyers, right? This is a school, right? This was the original, or one of the original aims of a university, right? But it's also a community of scholars engaged in free thought, right? Just a bunch of people paid by the public to sit around and think all day long. It's also an agora of ideas, a place where the market of ideas is being pursued. Like people come here to exchange ideas, maybe change their mind, maybe open up their minds to new ideas. It's also a depository of knowledge for public use. This is where all the knowledge is, right? If you want to know what is exactly the spectral line of hydrogen, whatever, you look up in Google who is the professor in that field, and you give them a call or send them an email. It's a depository of public knowledge, right? Public because the public is paying for it. It's also a tool for scientific discovery, literally a tool, right? This is how the public makes scientific discoveries, through the individual researcher, right? That's the element. But the university is the tool. And some people would argue that the university is an instrument for systemic change. It's a way to change society for the better. And that is fine, because she knows what I think about this kind of definition. But okay, some people would disagree with us, and we look at the university as a tool for that, for systemic change. And of course, the answer is all of the above. And depending on where you are in this list, you'd want to push towards applied versus pure science. And there is no right answer, right? So, of course, the state can push through funding. And this is a political question. What should the state do? What should the Ministry of Science do? What should the Ministry of... That's not the question I want to ask because it's, above my pay grade. I'm just a humble professor. We live in a university, in a community. Let's talk about what the university should do. And the university basically can do it through a single mechanism, which is put money, right? Researchers need money to pay for students, to buy equipment, to buy consumables. And if we don't have money, we don't do research. Theorists only need students, so it's kind of cheaper, but same rule applies. So the university has a very strong whip in which you can, direct the horses, which is the direction of the fund. And we see it, I didn't compile a list, but we see an infinite amount of calls for, applied science and climate science and saving the planet science and all kinds of sciences which are directed by the university. Is that a good or a bad thing? That's the question. I mean, or where should the limit be? Now, what is going on in the world? I mean, in roughly speaking, and this is the US, but the US is a representative of the world because scientifically speaking, they are of the world. You see that the percentage of federal budget going to applied science is kind of going down, but it's going down moderately. And it's not, situation is not that bad. This is a federal R&D total, and you can see this is the percentage for basic science. Not great, not terrible. Okay, it's not like we're fighting for our lives in the pure sciences. I don't think that's the situation. You can kind of see the same trends. US basic research expenditure, and you can see coming from federal government going down slightly, but coming from businesses kind of going up. And this is something that is amazingly happening in the last, I'm going to say, 10 years or 15 years since the boom of AI. So traditionally, basic science was only done outside federal funding in pharmaceuticals. Well, they had, some group of people that do that. But the AI kind of changed the game. Most of the research in AI and things like that is done not in academia, but in private institutions, in businesses. And that's going to change the landscape a little bit. I don't know how, of course, I don't have a crystal ball. So it's something to think about. But you see, and generally speaking, funding goes up. Right? It's just that the percentage from the budget goes down. But the funding per dollar is actually going up for pure sciences. So I'm not going to be to say, oh, we must save basic science. That's not what I'm going to do at all. I'm just going to ask the question. I don't have an answer. I have an opinion, which I will, of course, say it. But I don't have an answer. So what I want to do now is give the trivial arguments to why should the university focus on pure science, and then I'm going to answer to myself. Right? So I'm going to do this kind of Achilles and the turtle kind of discussion. Why should the public fund basic research? The public, I mean university specifically. Well, that's the foundation for future discoveries, and it's good for the economy. And I have to say there are very, very strong indications, because in the economy there are no proofs, but there are very, very clear indications that there is a correspondence between a government spending on basic science and growth of GDP. A very clear correlation. So it's good for economy, but it takes a long time to see your return on investment. Right? You might spend on basic research, and then it takes 15 to 20 years. Right? And this is, not great. Right? It's not a great return on investment time. Also, it might be good, but it might not be the best. right? Maybe you can get $11 per dollar on research, but maybe you can get $15 for dollar on something else, right? So the fact that it's good doesn't mean that it's the best. When you do economics, you always need to look at the alternatives. And clearly it's not clear that basic research is the best alternative. Not clear, at least not to me. It's good for non-economic benefits, right? And there are many non-economic benefits, things which are hard to measure. For example,
שימו לב, זוהי הודעת ביטחון.
okay. Here is another argument. Only universities can do basic science. Do applied science to the business. Really. There are many examples of businesses and private institutions doing basic research. I mean, in physics, the most important institute in the 90s was Bell Research Labs, which spurred numerous numbers of Nobel Prizes, and they were funded, they were not a university, they were a private business endeavor. And as I mentioned earlier, in the field of AI, I mean, you talk to Jan LeCun, and you know, in early days, people say, yes, I'm a professor at MIT, and I'm also, you know, giving consulting to some firm. But if you talk to Jan LeCun, he says, yes, I'm the head of AI at Google. I'm also a professor at MIT, but that's not a big deal. So things are shifting in AI towards basic research done in private businesses. And there are many examples for this. And there are also examples the other way around. Universities doing applied science very well, right? So you can find examples, and so this is not a very compelling argument, right? There is a romantic argument, right, which we've seen in the first editorial in Science, right? There is something beautiful in basic research, right? I call it מותר האדם מן הבהמה. This is what differentiates humans from animals. We look around and we try to figure out not how to get our food better, right? We passed that step long ago. We now want to understand why is it that the sun rises every day in the same place. We want to understand why is it that balls fall down or when apples fall down from trees, they fall directly toward the center of the earth, and it takes them exactly that amount of time to reach from the tree. We want to understand that. Why? Because we find it beautiful. And that's what differentiates us from the animal. That might be true, but the blanket is short, right? I mean, how much money should we spend to provide the curiosity of crazy people like me, right? Fine, it's romantic, but how much of your daily budget goes into romance? Not a lot. Maybe you should increase that a little bit. But it's a good argument, but it's also not very persuasive to people. So now you can flip the coin and ask, okay, why should the university spend money on applied science? Right? Because we understand, we saw a list of why should we spend money on pure sciences, and then why should we push for applied research? First of all, the universities have a concentration of brain and talent. Really. Obviously, you have not been to Tzediyah Pitloach industrial area, right? Let's not think of ourselves too high, right? Industry has a lot of very smart, right? True, it's a concentration here. It's not unique. Trust me. I mean, it's not a real thing, the concentration of brain and talent, right? It's a concentration of brain and talent doing specifically what we are aiming at chosen to do, which is publish papers in science. We're very good at that. We're chosen to do just that. But we're not particularly good at doing other things, right? So not clear that we are better at doing applied research than anywhere else. Universities are in general good at research. But basic research is very different than applied research. It's just two different animals. And it's quite unclear if someone who is good at doing basic research will also be good at eventually building a device which will actually you put in your cellar and will do funny noises and save you money somehow, right? Those are very different things. That's why it's called R&D, and we're kind of good at R. We're very bad at D. Okay, or at least we're not equipped for that. Oh, okay. It brings a lot of money to the university. Yeah. So, university is not a business. Businesses want money. Universities should focus on what they want to do. Okay, 2 minutes do I have? I want my time back. And actually, good question, does it? I mean, Ben-Gurion University doesn't have a lot of money for applied research. It just doesn't, because we're not good at it. Okay, so I'm finishing. I have an opinion, okay? The question again will be repeating, how much should the university spend on applied science versus pure science? And the answer is I don't know. I have an opinion, okay? I have an opinion. And the opinion stems from this guy. This guy is my father. And he was a faculty member in the Department of Nuclear Engineering. He was a physicist by training. During his PhD, he developed something called the track rotation estimator, with something in nuclear physics. You calculate how much neutron flux from a non-circular object. And he went to Los Alamos National Labs and developed this even further, came back. I was a baby at that time. A true story, behind the crib when they came home, there were films of computer code, which was stolen from Los Alamos and brought to Israel. I can say it now because my father is long dead for at least 10 years, so it's fine. And you can also see, and when he came back, this was 1978, faculty members were paid minimum wages. So we were poor. Everyone was poor, that was fine. But my father, who grew up extremely poor, got sick of it. And he understood that he can use the method that he developed to actually do something in industry. And he developed a system to calculate all kinds of stuff. Eventually ended up working in the defense industries. This research was pivotal, for example, in the Hetz project. And lots of stories about that. You can also see how high-tech looked like in the mid-80s. And the most beautiful thing here is the cigarettes that everyone is smoking as they are looking at the immensely fat and heavy laptops. So it's a very nice thing to look at. He had no choice. He needed to feed me, so we went into applied research. In 1986, there was a big strike, and the salary of the faculty members was joined with those of public servants, and now we're paid very well. I'm glad to say this. I don't have anything to complain. I can keep on doing basic research and not lose financial account. And if I choose to go into applied science, it's because I choose to do that, because something led me to that through my academic career. And we heard a beautiful example for that. So, is it better to be forced into applied science, or is it better to be pushed through just the dynamics of life? Could I have written a patent without working for 4 years on photocatalytic nanoplasmonics before that, without any idea what it's good for? Probably not, right? So all these things are listed in here. My opinion is that the university should not promote any research direction. Not even to differentiate between applied and pure science, but nothing. The university should not tell any one of the researchers what to do. Not by funding, not by any means. The only thing that the university should do is, if they want to give money, base it on merit. Is it good science? Is it bad science? That's it. Everything else has two major problems. One, the university leaders, they have no a priori knowledge which basic science will be important or which applied science will work. They just don't know. And two, there is no mechanism to promote one discipline without punishing it. Oh, the blanket is fine. And I would like to finish. This is my last slide. I know. This is my last slide. This is a part of a bigger problem. You know, the push towards applied science in the university is part of the bigger problem, which is that the university, at least from some perspectives, the administration only cares about money. This is things that we heard not a week ago from some university official who told us we only care how profitable the researchers is when we hire them. Another different university official told us that I will only support candidates that can submit an ERC grant. These are the big European grants which bring a lot of money to the university. And same one said her CV, because we were looking at it, is stellar. She has a Nature paper and submitted an ERC. Right? And so it's all about these fashionable papers and these money that you can bring to it. But is that good science? It's a different question. Right? In this case, it was actually very bad science, in my opinion. In my opinion, matter. So we were lucky there. But this is the wind coming from a university which is kind of looks like it's struggling to survive. And what I'm saying is no. You don't need to survive. All you need to do is go to the ethics code of BGU, which is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful paper, who is being discarded altogether. The fundamental aim of the university, this is written at BGU, to seek, investigate, and teach the truth. And to promote these aims, the university operates as a non-profit basis and independent of any immediate social networks. Thank you.